And Michelle hit us up. She says, Ohio State is going to look a lot like Michigan did in 2024 with all their replacing and all their rebuilding. So, okay, that's a take for sure, but it doesn't stop there. She says Michigan takes a huge step forward on offense. Again, I can get behind that. Bryce Underwood probably going to be the guy for you. I don't think that's irresponsible. New OC and Chip Lindsey, I'm here for it. Michigan wins the game for the 5th straight time. Mic drop. For all y'all wondering what the line is on that game. As of right now, Ohio State currently favored by 5.5 against Michigan. Y'all, if Michigan wins for the 5th time in a row, could they really do that? With a freshman quarterback potentially? Like, she makes some valid points with what Ohio State's losing. Let's kind of compare both situations, though. Michigan, coming off a national title in 2023, they were 128 out of 134 in returning production. 36% was back. On top of that, new head coach. Okay, so there was a total reset for Michigan from 23 to 24. Now, for Ohio State, you lose a lot. I don't know what the returning production numbers will be for them. Have a hard time believing it's going to be 36% overall, but still, I don't think it'll be all that great. You're going to have a new quarterback. You're going to have new cats in the backfield toting the rock for you. You lose one of the most productive wide receivers ever. You lose your offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. You lose defensive linemen. Like, you hear the gist of what I'm saying. Ohio State loses a ton. To me, though, there's a bit of a difference in what Michigan was post-Natty and what Ohio State is post-Natty. One is the obvious of, well, Ohio State still has their head coach. Whatever you think about Ryan Day, you just make sure you mention dude won a national title, okay? So 70-10, I think he's a top 2 coach in the sport, and he's still your guy. So in that sense, not a total reset when it comes to practice structure and what the meetings feel like and all those things. Yes, different coaches on the staff for sure, but your head coach is the same. So at the top, not a total reset. More importantly, Ohio State has just recruited, and this is not a knock on Michigan, but like they've recruited at a much higher level than Michigan. And Michigan's going to, I think, get in that game a lot more here under Sharon Moore. But looking at what they were post-national title, like Michigan had one top 10 class between 2021 and 2024, and they were number 9 in 2022. By comparison, Ohio State hasn't finished outside the top 5 since 2019. So, yes, you lose some pieces, but the dude in the waiting is 5-star Julian Sayin coming in for Will Howard, as opposed to J.J. McCarthy leaves. Is it Alex Orji? Is it Davis Warren? And if it's not Julian Sayin, it's another top 10 quarterback and Lincoln Kienholz in his own respective class. So the gaps that you fill, the talent level overall from a raw ingredients perspective is in a better spot for Ohio State than it was for Michigan. Now, I'm saying this, but what I'm saying isn't altogether something that's different from the last couple of seasons either. Like, the roster was superior for Ohio State last year when they met up in Columbus. And what happened? Michigan went out and played a more poised game, played better within the margins, and beat Ohio State physically and on the scoreboard and won the game for the 4th time in a row. So even if Ohio State doesn't have this massive step back, even if they just reset, it's like, well, they're probably not as talented, assuming now, not as talented as what they were a season ago. I know we're in February, we're projecting, but like that's how it feels. Now, Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs are still, I believe, top 2 best players in the sport, so that probably helps things. They were on the team a year ago, too. Michigan still won that game. So can Michigan beat them for the 5th time in a row? That's where this gets really interesting. That was the most gettable Michigan team Ryan Day is going to have as long as Sharon Moore's on the other sideline. No other way around it. There's a total reset. Still some NFL guys, but like the talent will not be the same, I believe, ever again, or as large of a delta between Ohio State and Michigan. Like Ohio State, let's be real here. The defense is really good, but 60 yards and 2 interceptions from your quarterback at Michigan was enough to win the football game. I don't know what Bryce Underwood's going to be. I think he's going to be really good. There's no way to know for sure, but I have to believe he's better than 60-some-odd yards and 2 picks against Ohio State. That'd be my assumption. I don't think that's irresponsible. I think the roster overall is better for Michigan when you talk about what they've done via the portal and things of that nature. Also, it's going to be in Ann Arbor. Got them in Columbus last year. It's going to be at home. I don't think that necessarily favors Ohio State. So for Ohio State, on top of all this, like they're still resetting to some degree. There's still going to be new guys playing different, positions. Like Julian saying, I just mentioned, we talked through the defense and how that'll look different. Talked through having to replace your DC with Matt Patricia and your offensive coordinator now is Brian Hartline. There's still going to be a lot that you at least have to account for Ohio State based on what it was a season ago. So let's walk this through. Let's say that this take is incorrect and Ohio State beats Michigan. I know it's the first time in a minute, but they get it done. I know it's going to feel like they should do it for Ohio State fans, but I just think that this would finally remove for Ryan Day the last yeah but for some of the Buckeye fans. Because even with winning a national title, even with being 70-10, even with all of us sitting here and saying, dude's one of the top coaches in the sport. I think there's some folks that are saying he's the best coach in the sport right now. Again, I think he's number 2 behind Kirby Smart, but I don't think that's a conversation you can't have right now. There's still some Buckeye fans saying, yep, but dude just can't beat Michigan. Now, that's not altogether true because he has beat Michigan one time, but the point remains. Of the last 4 tries, 0-4. And that doesn't sit well with them. And I'm not telling you that it should, but I do think if you beat them this season and you put on top of that last year's national title, this past season, I think that would do a lot for the acceptance of Ryan Day at Ohio State, even with the contract extension he just got. Also, I think for Ryan Day, like the longevity for him, I'd feel a lot more confident telling you today, hey, Ryan Day is going to be at Ohio State for the next 5 years plus, 10 years plus, if they can start to beat Michigan. Because if the other thing happens, and this take is correct, and Michigan gets it done, it wouldn't be that crazy because of all that we just said, because a less talented, more gettable team beat Ohio State at their place this past season. It wouldn't be crazy. But what I think it would do is, if you're Michigan, what does the next 5 years look like for you? If this is now the next 3 years at least with Bryce Underwood, like you feel pretty good about where you stand at that point. You probably feel pretty good about the way that you're going to continue to just provide more momentum for what that thing already is in Ann Arbor and the recruiting and the NIL and all those things. But the more interesting thing to me is the Ryan Day discussion here, because I don't think Ryan Day would get fired. I think the national title has made us all just realize dude's a good coach. But with how just ugly things get, I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Day says, you know what, no, I'm out. I'm out. And I wouldn't fault him for that. I wouldn't be a fan of that. I don't think that's the right move if you're talking about, being the best coach for Ohio State in terms of like them asking him to leave. But I think if Ryan Day decides he wants to go after that, I don't think that's out of the question because of how intense that rivalry has been and because of the narrative around him in general and how tough a loss has made that thing. So again, not rooting for anything here in that sense, but I just think that's an interesting ripple effect to keep a pulse on if Michigan does, for the 5th year in a row, beat Ohio State. But we'll see what happens. I think that game, too, is going to have some good stakes, just so y'all are we're all dialed in together. I think that's going to be a fun game. It's always a fun game, but in terms of those past couple of seasons where they were playing essentially for the Big Ten championship, I think it might be a similar kind of intensity here for the college football public when we watch Michigan, Ohio State here going forward.